tariff until Mexico ceased sending fentanyl and illegal aliens across our borders. He's even threatened a higher tariff. The new Mexican president, Sheinbaum, bristled at first, promising retaliation, then realized she had no choice and decided to play ball. But will she? And if she doesn't, and the cartels continue to control Mexico, will Trump invade? Not off the tables. And then, of course, there's the real possibility Trump may remove income taxes altogether and have American revenue rely on tariffs only.
We were so wealthy, we had commissions set up what to do with all the money that we were taking in. We had no income tax, we only had tariffs. I consider that to be the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
To all this, we bring in former Congressman of Virginia and economic firebrand Dave Brat. He's also the Senior Vice President of Business Relations at Liberty University. Welcome back.
Thanks a lot, Chanel. Merry Christmas in advance.
Merry Christmas. Well, look at these headlines and forecast to us in what do you think the immediate effect will be? You know, tariffs for first and foremost seem to have had a pretty immediate effect even before Trump has set foot in office, as I laid out. But what happens once he is in office and he starts imposing some of these tariffs?
Yeah, well, the context to all of this is it's a big set of word salad, but it's the post-World War II Bretton Woods liberal world order, rules-based order. And that thing was set out, the U.S. made a deal with the rest of the world. We're going to protect the sea lanes and provide free trade in exchange for you abandoning the Soviet, system back then. And so right now, the Trump and the EU and NATO at loggerheads, he faced them up the first time he was in office. They're not paying their fair share. They're not living up to the rules-based order. Our capital markets have funded China to the tune of them catching up to us. They're building a blue water navy, and they wrote a document in 1909 called Unrestricted Warfare that leads up to all this. So Trump and tariffs, he's just using tariffs for two reasons. One, we've exported all of our jobs and cheap labor. Everybody hears that part. But we've also exported our plants and companies, right? And the capital equipment that goes along with the workers. Trump knows the real economy, not just the stock market. The real economy has to be fixed to raise American wages. And then second, he's using tariffs for real. And he will do them. He says, if you don't want to play by the rules, right, especially China, then we're going to make a level playing field and you're going to pay the tax on your cheating through tariffs. And that's roughly what he's proposing. And everybody knows what he's doing. It makes perfect sense.
No, it does. But speaking of China, China, as we've discussed in past, is leading the charge with BRICS, the alternative currency to try and replace the US dollar. And they had some momentum under Biden, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They then expanded. And as the Biden administration started pushing away Saudi Arabia, even Saudi Arabia was entertaining joining BRICS, was just mind boggling. But, now that Trump is seeing, eyeing a return and plans to return, he has threatened a 100% tariff on any nation that actively participates in BRICS. Here's his latest statement on this. Take a listen.
We took in $600 billion and more in taxes and tariffs from China. No other president took in 10 cents, not 10 cents, not 10 cents. And we're going to be doing things. We're going to be treating people very fairly. But the word reciprocal is important because if somebody charges us, India, we don't have to talk about own. If India charges us 100%, do we charge them nothing for the same? They send in a bicycle and we send them a bicycle. They charge us 100 and 200. India charges a lot. Brazil charges a lot. If they want to charge us, that's fine, but we're going to charge them the same thing.
That's a big worried about tariff.
The senators, some of them aren't necessarily business people.
So two related questions. What does China do in response to this in 2025, your forecast? And what happens to BRICS?
Yeah, well, big world, and just to add some numbers to this thing, China right now has $100 trillion in capital equipment, right? Not financial capital. The U.S. only has 70 trillion in capital. So that's going to be a shocker to most people. The other shocker is that China's government sector is smaller than the United States. They're a communist, totalitarian surveillance state. Their government is 14% of GDP, right? And ours is 18% of GDP, right? So now the thing about China is they act strong, but their hand is weakening by the day. Germany's in free fall. France is in free fall. The UK's in free fall, right? Europe is in free fall. We are the undisputed leader again because all the others are failing. And so China can act big. They need us more than we need them by far, right? Trade's only about 15, 16% of our economy, whereas for them, it's much bigger.
Right.
And so they can act tough and flex their muscles and all that. And, the United States has bent over backwards. We're, a country out of the Judeo-Christian West. We have that moral sentiments. And 1.4 billion people. We do not want China to collapse for the sake of the people. But the CCP is another matter. They are repressing their people and repressing religion, something awful. And so Trump is going to be strong. India is going to be the key, right? They're bigger than China population-wise. They've been our friend more than China. And that we'll see what Trump does with Modi. That's going to be the telltale sign right there.
So, another big conversation piece that would have a very impactful effect on our national security and our economy is this discussion Trump has sparked of taking back the Panama Canal. Talk about the effects that would have on China and its calculation in Central and South America.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot of big moves like that from Trump, right? The U.S. is footing the bill for everybody, right? We have a border invasion. We're footing the bill for the entire rules-based order. Everyone takes advantage of that, uses it, loves doing business with us, using our financial markets. And as you played in the previous clip, Trump said the key word is reciprocal. That is the golden rule, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, the U.S., we're no saint. Our CIA, and I know we're going to get to the Ukraine and all that, and our State Department have been way less than saints. But the United States people in general have been very fair players on the world stage. And so the Suez Canal, other geopolitical hotspots in the world, I think we're going to be applying a lot of leverage when it comes to oil, in the Middle East and the Red Sea and Yemen and the hotspots. We have 14 hotspots. China's behind most all of them, 4 wars. I think you're going to see a lot of that cleaned up pretty rapidly with President Trump.
What is also your take on I guess, the pushback against the use of tariffs? The United States, if you look back on history, and Trump raised this in his speech recently, but tariff usage has been extremely effective in raising revenue, and it's very unpopular amongst a globalist set for natural reasons. But it really hasn't been done in the way that Trump is proposing, has it?
No, that's right. He, it's limited. As I said, trade's only 15% of our economy. So you're not going to raise enough revenues from those alone. But he's right on target as a strategic tool. And the globalists, right, whenever you use terms like the economy is doing well, consumption is strong. Well, yeah, because the Fed printed $9 trillion on their balance sheet, and we're running $2 trillion in deficits. Those are hugely stimulative. Imagine what our economy would look like if you took both of those away from the punch bowl. Right. And that's what Trump's dealing with. They've tried to Trump-proof this economy, leave him with a bad hand to play cards. And so comment. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, speaking of the bad hand, the international front is just as badly left as the economic front. Going to Ukraine, President Macron of France has committed to deploy a European Union force of up to 100,000 troops to Ukraine. This on the tail end of Biden administration on the way out, authorizing U.S. missiles. To your point, they seem to be setting everything on fire on the way out, as if the American people won't notice or as if the world won't react.
Now, the middle class knows, right? That last point I was just making, the rich and the elitists are doing fine, right? The economy, they say, is growing a couple percent. And I showed you why the real economy is not. But as the middle class, right, the bottom 50% of this country, how they're doing. And the answer is terrible. Ask them if they want to fund wars. I was just in Ukraine, right? I was in Kiev last week. And the Ukrainians are Christian, right? My heart goes out to them. But what they don't know is the U.S. CIA did a coup d'etat on their country in 2014, kicked out their president. This is well known, right? Just go listen to Mike Benz or all these geopolitical experts. And then on top of that, we pledged way back that we would not move to the east, right? The Russian, the Soviet Union wall fell apart. We pledged, we took 14 countries. All those countries have to buy defense weapons from the United States of America. It's enriching all of the military and industrial complex. It's enriching all the oligarchs. The American people are paying the bill. Trump's going to end that. That one's going to be a little harder. And he's noted that lately because we've been shooting missiles into the Russian heartland, right? Just to provoke a fight. And it's a little ironic, right? Putin's the head of a communist state, so I'm not a fanboy there. But he's the one showing restraint, not the U.S. State Department right now.
No, that's a very good point. And it seems that there's this worldwide understanding that no matter what the Biden administration is doing, they're not actually the ones in charge even now. Everyone seems to be forward looking into 2025 and really kind of poo-pooing or ignoring all the antics from the Biden administration, anticipating Trump, which is a remarkable thing. I really don't recall a lot of instances in history where that has happened.
No, and what you just said is so stunning and so important, and the American people almost cannot take it in psychologically, right? That the president has not been in charge for 4 years. Now the mainstream media is finally coming true on this, right? All the research, all the data points of his absence are coming clear. The Hunter Biden laptop was hidden from all views 4 years ago. That's, of course, linked to Ukraine and Burisma and the oil deals. Lindsey Graham, senator, said there's over $3 trillion in minerals over there, and it's better that their boys die than ours. 1 million dead young Ukrainian and Russian boys. And the mainstream media, no attention. The American people know something's going on, but they don't know the full story. And when they find out about the role of our CIA and the evil we've done, and it is evil, Merry Christmas has a significant meaning to it, and it's got a superficial meaning. And it's time for Americans to get real serious on the meaning of life this Christmas season.
Beautifully said. I think there's a reckoning coming for the intelligence community. I have some reservations about how well the cleanup will look like at the CIA, since it's so big and so entrenched. And now we have conversations about black funding, black funding for projects that don't have congressional oversight. And that's an incredible conversation, something we'll have to say for another time. But, when you look at the scale of corruption, as you mentioned, and Burisma, Ukraine, all of this, we should keep talking about it only because they provided that blueprint to find the other scenarios. And I hope that everyone acts with expediency on that front. Congressman, Dean, thank you so much for all the time. We appreciate it.
Great show, Chanel. Merry Christmas to everybody. God bless you all.
We've had to watch a lot of lawfare waged against conservatives and against Donald Trump and his allies. These efforts started with a bang. Will they truly end in a 2025 whimper? We've got Louisiana's Attorney General Liz Murrill up next to give it to us straight on why and how all of this will play out. Some of the more accurate forecasts we could possibly make sitting here in 2024 about 2025 is to look at some of the biggest stories of this past year and find the ones whose endings have yet to be written. Joining us now to guide us through and discuss, Liz Murrill, Attorney General of Louisiana. Welcome back, General.
Thanks. It's always great to be with you, Chanel.
Well, I couldn't think of a better person to walk us through some of the lawfare stories that I believe will be hot topics in 2025. Starting with this. One of the first lawfare stories of 2025 will surely have to do with Trump's border and immigration security policies. Now, Trump has already told the world what he plans to do with mass deportations under border czar Tom Homan. When Big Lie Media bristled at this idea and tried to frame Trump's deportation plan as heartless, here's how Trump responded.
Well, I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together and you have to send them all back.
The response to this is predictable. Start with the lawyers. Here's head of the ACLU, Anthony Romero, reassuring Rachel Maddow that ACLU has lawyers in all 50 states and will be joining forces with other civil rights groups and local officials to use lawfare to fight Trump's immigration plan.
So part of what we're doing is we're preparing executive orders and we're organizing our folks to put pressures on elected officials so they don't roll over. They should sever these relationships they have with the federal government on immigration enforcement. They should make sure that our prisons and our jails are off limits. They should begin to think about what actions they could take to pardon immigrants who have a criminal record because they drove on a suspended license. Well, let's take them out of harm's way.
They could do that now.
Let's commute.
They could do that now in the transition.
Yes. And so part of what we got to do is we got to swarm our allies in some of these places. And even in red states, you have some blue mayors. And so there's a whole game plan for this.
Colonel Murrell, your reaction to Mr. Romero there, I mean, it sounds like he wants to do a commuting spree. He wants to protect illegal migrants. He wants to swarm, officials and really tell them that ACLU has got your back. You can stand up to the president and his plan. What's your reaction to all this?
You know, the states can't pardon someone for violating federal law, and it violated federal law when they entered our country illegally. So I would start there. And, I think people are appalled by what's happened in our country at the hands of the Biden administration due to illegal immigrants. I mean, just yesterday, an illegal immigrant set a woman on fire in the subway in New York. Like, it's, we've had crime here. We've had a number of people that were murdered in New Orleans in the French Quarter due to juvenile illegal immigrants. And I think that, they're just wrong. Like, there is going to be a dramatic response to these policies. They never should have opened the border in the first place. And we had a stable border when Trump left the presidency the first time. So I am confident that's going to be the number one on the agenda.
That's a great answer, because on the one hand, you think that Mr. Romero, I think Mr. Romero is a smart guy. He's not an idiot. He's the head of ACLU. He runs a lot of lawyers. Yet he is very conveniently leapfrogging over that very point you just made, which is, if the federal law is broken at the beginning of a person's stay in the United States, everything else they do doesn't suddenly become, a means for a local official to then exercise their authority over them and protect them? Or is there some other logic he's using?
Just throwing things out, trying to give some of the liberal governors ideas and, encouraging them to attempt to block cooperation with the federal government. And the federal law does not require state officials to cooperate. It does require them to not get in the way. So they can't obstruct ICE. They actually do have to cooperate, but they don't have to help ICE. So, we saw that before. We saw it with sanctuary cities where you had state officials that were saying, we're not going to do anything to help the federal government remove somebody. I think with President Trump, they just need to get out of the way. And if they get in the way, they'll be violating federal law.
Well, the next big story is somewhat related, but it's also the fact that we'll encounter some lawfare in 2025 related to Trump's effort to put an end to sanctuary cities once and for all. Here's a headline: Sanctuary cities respond to Trump deportation plans. We're preparing to defend our communities. According to the Denverite, this is a local publication, Denver Mayor Mike Johnston plans to station Denver police, quote, at the county line to keep federal authorities out. Now, he did later walk back some of this statement, but not really. So again, what's the law on this? The Supreme Court has, of course, back in the civil rights days, established that the federal government, under the Take Care Clause and even the Commerce Clauses, does not face a state official who then defies federal law. So there's federal supremacy over local and state laws, but then the problem is, at what point is a confrontation like this an infringement of the state's own 10th Amendment rights? Walk us through some of the legalities of that.
Look, federal immigration law preempts state law. And so, he really cannot use state police officers to obstruct federal officials carrying out immigration orders. And so I think that's, highly doubt that the police department would cooperate with such an order, because it flatly violates federal law, and they could all get arrested by federal marshals and thrown in prison. So, the mayor might stand at the border and, stake his flag there for Colorado and say, I'm not going to cooperate and I'm going to stand in the way, but he could get arrested and they'll just move him out of the way. That's all I can really say about it. I don't think he can keep the promise he's making.
Well, do you envision that in 2025, at some point, we're going to see some of these emboldened Democrat leaders stand up at some point to one of these confrontations, and we have National Guardsmen and local officials engaging in fisticuffs? Does it come to that in 2025? General Murrell, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Is the deep state in distress, or are they just recalibrating? One of the original exposers of all things Fedsurrection and other nefarious government treason against the people, we have Darren Beattie on. Kash Patel and other commentary you won't want to miss. We'll be right back. I know I'm not alone when I say one of the most exciting things coming up in 2025 is the dismantling of America's most rotten institutions, from the FBI to the Pentagon. We've got Kash Patel bringing the steamroller to the FBI to exorcise it of its anti-American, anti-constitutional rot. Of course, all the right people are terrified of Kash's potential entrance. Here's the former and always disgraced Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, a man who likely spied on Kash Patel himself, mind you.
The installation, or the nomination, I guess we should say at this point, of Kash Patel as FBI Director can only possibly be a plan to disrupt, to dismantle, to distract the FBI, and to possibly use it as a tool for the president's political agenda.
So jumping in on this conversation is the one investigative journalist who's never let up on the corruption this institution has become, the one and only Darren Beattie, founder of Revolver News. Welcome back.
Great to be back with you, Chanel.
So I want to hear your reaction to, of course, the pushback that establishment FBI seem to have against Kash Patel, but I also want to hear what you look forward to most in a Kash Patel FBI of 2025.
Well, that's a great question, and it's a phenomenal pick by Trump. I think that goes without saying. This one will get through. I think Kash Patel will be the next FBI director. That is why you see McCabe and the other nefarious, villainous instruments of the deep state so terrified. I have a very specific wish list, a very specific agenda. We've spoken about this before. The big story that basically I've broken through revolver.news is the scandalous story of the January 6th pipe bomb. It's a scandal that implicates the Department of Justice, the Capitol Police, the Secret Service, the FBI, just to name a few, of these institutions. And basically, the stage of our investigation at revolver.news is we're in the end stage. We're 95% there. The remaining 5% is frankly out of my control. In order to tie this up, put a ribbon on it, I can hand it over to Kash Patel on a silver platter and say, these are exactly the things you need to do. These are the specific names you need to look into. This is the specific information that I know is within the FBI that you have now the authority to release. Just one example of such things is the former head of the FBI's Washington field office, who used to run the pipe bomb investigation for Christopher Wray. He infamously volunteered himself before the Judiciary Committee and said that they tried to use geofencing technology to identify the pipe bomber, and he claimed, unfortunately, the data came back and it was corrupted and we couldn't use it. We exposed the fallacy of this in a number of angles because there are many ways to do geofencing. The main way was through Google. That's how all the other agencies did it, from the DOJ. That's how they unmasked a bunch of people that they prosecuted. He didn't even use Google. So it was clear they didn't even want it. But the amazing thing is, it's recently come out that even the bit about the telecom data being corrupted was a lie. We know that they have the telecom data. We know that it isn't corrupted. I know precisely which telecom company it is. And unfortunately, I'm not authorized to say that at the moment, but I am very confident that will come out. And so that information is within the FBI. Also, the two specific agents who are responsible for this investigation and therefore presumably the cover-up within the FBI, those people are also known. And so there are various other things that I won't say, but it's right there on a silver platter. And all I need is a courageous and cooperative and accommodating director of the FBI and attorney general. And I'm pretty confident I have that in Kash Patel for the FBI. And I'm very much hoping that he will make this a top priority, simply because the stakes and the implications of how high this scandal goes. And look, people talk about being disruptive. It's not really about being disruptive. We need to air out the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how unpalatable, not for the sake of embarrassing our criminal overlords, but for the sake of ultimately reestablishing legitimacy in these institutions. If the American people don't trust their institutions, we cannot be the superpower that we once were. In order to be a serious country again, we have to have people take our institutions seriously. And in order for that to happen, we need the truth to come out, and we need accountability for the criminal scum that has ruined the reputation of these institutions.
You know, Darren, I know you've had these too, but I've had conversations with Kash before all of this about, his take on J6, and he's personally very motivated to get to the bottom of these mysteries. So I think you're right. I'm confident that you will have a very open audience with his FBI going into 2025, in which case we will be glued to Revolver News to watch how those headlines actually finish out and close out. Because when the FBI came out, when the IG report from Horowitz came out and said they only had 3 agents who were actively operating on the ground, I think a lot of us were laughing.
There wasn't a word. There wasn't a word, by the way, in that IG report about the pipe bomb. So I think the thing about that IG report is there was enough to be damning, but the real damning stuff was the stuff that was simply left unsaid.
I think you're right about that one. We'll be watching to see how that story ends. On the other side, you've got another big institution that's undergoing a massive sea change, some very painful changes if his nomination goes through. Pete Hegseth, incoming Secretary of Defense, a guy with zero Pentagon stench, bulldozing his way into the DoD to break up this military-industrial complex. He's got 2 Bronze Stars, degrees from Harvard and Princeton. He's got a common man's sense. Hegseth is about to clean house at the Pentagon. And the Pentagon is a place that has become too slow and never accountable. Here's just a snapshot of Hegseth's approach.
The Pentagon is in the book the exact amount of years, but in the past X number of years, 10, 12, 15, the Pentagon has a perfect record in all of its war games against China. We lose every time inside the Pentagon war games. We know what our real capability. You see, we didn't even get to this part of the war on warriors. I mean, the military-industrial complex, the way we procure weapon systems. We're always the way our system works, the way our bureaucratic system works, where the speed of weapons procurement works. We're always a decade behind in fighting the last war.
Now, I know you don't cover the Pentagon as much, but it's still under your wheelhouse of just covering the corruption that has become our federal government, hiding in the recesses of bureaucracy, the darkness of bureaucracy. What do you think is going to be the top headlines that we see out of the Pentagon if Hegseth takes the helm?
Well, I think he is going to get rid of a lot of the ideological trash that currently inhabits those hallowed hallways in the Pentagon. You know, one story that Pete picked up personally and was very interested in, and he had me on his show to talk about it, was when we at Revolver.News exposed an individual called Bishop Garrison, who was sort of the ideological veteran chief in the Pentagon, who was conducting the purge, basically, of conservatives and Trump supporters within the Pentagon. I assume and hope that he will be a day one fire if he doesn't simply leave already in anticipation of this disgraceful outcome. But there are many, many others that haven't been called out by name that need to be uncovered, need to be eliminated, along with the general posture and orientation and notion that this is an appropriate place in which to experiment with these radical and destructive ideologies. It's one thing to have it, in universities or at NGOs or various other types of nonprofits. That's bad enough, but to have it in the Pentagon seems to be maybe the last place that you'd want this sort of nonsense. And so I think one place that future Secretary Hegseth will do a lot of good will be in sort of reorienting the goals of the Pentagon toward maintaining America's military supremacy and less about experimenting with radical political ideologies.
Won't those be glorious headlines? Darren Beattie, we look forward to tracking what you guys uncover. Always doing great work out there on the ground, and you've been dogged, so this is going to be a very exciting upcoming year. We appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, a look back at the future, or yesterday's dreams of today. I think you'll enjoy this one. We'll stay right here. It's time now for Mark My Words. Today's submission comes from 1966. This is an ad predicting what the year 1999 would look like for you home shoppers and bill payers who have the modern convenience of a home computer at your fingertips.
Fingertip shopping will be one of the many homemakers' conveniences. This video console will be channeled into the store of her choice. There, a camera will scan a display of wares, which she will select by push button. Another part of this console is a household monitor screen, which maintains a watch on critical areas in the house, swimming pool, or yard. What the wife selects on her console will be paid for by the husband at his counterpart console. All bills and transactions will be carried out electronically. A central bank computer will debit the family's account the amount of purchases and credit the department store, for example, informing the family's home computer at the same time. Father, at the touch of a button, receives an instantaneous printed copy of his budget, the amount of taxes he owes, the payments left on the car, and so forth. All documents and household records are available on the video screen for immediate reference. Also at his disposal is an electronic correspondence machine, or home post office, which allows for instant written communication between individuals anywhere in the world.
No, all things considered, they weren't that far off. Submit your predictions to Mark My Words at OANN.com. And if you haven't already, download the OAN Live app on your TV and your favorite streaming devices. You can also catch any Fine Point episodes you may have missed right there in the app with our video on demand feature. I leave you with this. But far more numerous was the herd as such, who think too little and who talk too much. Good night, Godspeed, until next time.